A millionaire's blind date took an unexpected turn when a little girl showed up instead and changed his life forever. The Rosewood Cafe buzzed with its usual evening crowd of professionals and couples, the warm lighting casting golden shadows across polished wood tables and exposed brick walls. David Sterling sat at his reserved corner table, checking his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. As the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a tech company he'd built from nothing into a billion-dollar empire, David was accustomed to punctuality. Time was money, and both were resources he valued above all else. At 35, David had everything a successful man was supposed to want: a penthouse overlooking the city, a collection of luxury cars, and more wealth than he could spend in several lifetimes. What he didn't have, and what his concerned sister Emma had been pestering him about for months, was someone to share it all with. That's how he'd ended up here, on his first blind date in over a decade. "She's perfect for you," Emma had insisted during their last family dinner. "Sarah Mitchell. She's intelligent, beautiful, and she won't be impressed by your money. Trust me, David, you need someone real in your life." David had reluctantly agreed, partly to stop his sister's matchmaking attempts, and partly because he was tired of the superficial relationships that dominated his social circle. Women who were more interested in his bank account than his personality had become exhaustingly predictable. He glanced at his phone. 7:15. His date was 15 minutes late, which in David's world was practically unforgivable. He was contemplating leaving when he heard a small voice beside his table. "Excuse me, mister. Are you David?" David looked down to see a little girl, no more than 5 years old, standing beside his chair. She had golden curls tied back with a pink ribbon, and wore a simple floral dress that looked like it had been carefully chosen for a special occasion. Her blue eyes were wide with curiosity, and a hint of nervousness. Yes, I'm David," he replied, completely bewildered. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The little girl climbed onto the chair across from him with the determined efficiency of someone who had clearly been given specific instructions. "I'm Emma," she announced. "My mommy said to tell you she's really sorry for being late. She had to go help someone who was very sick." David stared at the child, his mind struggling to process this unexpected development. "Your mommy? Are you Sarah's daughter?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Mommy said you're very important, and that I should be extra polite. She said to tell you that she'll be here as soon as she can, but the sick person needs her more right now." The businessman in David wanted to be annoyed. He'd blocked out an entire evening for this date, rearranged meetings, and even arrived early to make a good impression. But looking at Emma's earnest face, he found his irritation melting into confusion, mixed with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. "Where exactly is your mother?" David asked gently. "At the hospital," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "She's a nurse. Sometimes people get really sick and she has to help them, even when she's supposed to be somewhere else. She always says that helping sick people is more important than anything." David felt something shift in his chest. In his world, appointments were sacred, commitments were binding, and being late was a sign of disrespect or poor planning. But here was a 5-year-old explaining that her mother had chosen to save lives over keeping a dinner date. "Well," David said, surprising himself with his calm tone, "I suppose we should wait for her then. Are you hungry?" Emma's face lit up. "Mommy said I could order chocolate milk if you said it was okay." David signaled the waitress, a young woman who approached with barely concealed amusement at the unusual pairing at the corner table. "Chocolate milk for the lady," David said, "and I'll have another coffee." "Coming right up," the waitress smiled. "What a beautiful daughter you have." "Oh, I'm not," David began, but Emma interrupted. "He's not my daddy," she explained cheerfully. "My daddy lives far away. David is Mommy's friend. Well, he's going to be her friend. Mommy was very nervous about meeting him." The waitress nodded knowingly and went to get their drinks, leaving David alone with Emma and a growing awareness that this evening was nothing like what he'd planned. "So," David said, attempting to make conversation with someone whose worldview was completely foreign to him. "Tell me about yourself, Emma." The little girl launched into an animated description of her kindergarten class, her best friend Lily, and her pet goldfish named Bubbles. She spoke with the uninhibited enthusiasm that only children possess, completely unaware that she was making small talk with one of the city's most powerful businessmen. Mommy reads to me every night, Emma continued, even when she's really tired from work. She does different voices for all the characters. She's really good at the princess voice. David found himself genuinely interested, despite his usual discomfort around children. What's your favorite story? Cinderella, Emma replied without hesitation. Mommy says it's about being kind, even when life is hard. She says that's the most important thing, being kind. The chocolate milk arrived, and Emma thanked the waitress with the careful politeness of a child who had been taught good manners. David watched as she sipped her drink, leaving a small mustache of chocolate that she wiped away with her napkin. David, Emma said suddenly, are you rich? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Why do you ask? Mommy said you have a really important job and that you're very successful. She looked up your company on the computer. She wanted to make sure she knew things to talk about with you. David felt an unexpected warmth at the thought of Sarah researching his company, preparing for their date with the same attention to detail that had built his empire. I do well for myself, he said carefully. Emma nodded sagely. Mommy works really hard too, but we don't have much money. She says that's okay because we have each other, and that's worth more than anything you can buy. The simplicity of the statement hit David harder than any business proposal or market analysis ever had. Here was a 5-year-old articulating a philosophy that had somehow eluded him despite his advanced degrees and professional success. Your mother sounds very wise, David said. She is, Emma agreed. She knows how to make people feel better when they're hurt. Not just their bodies, but their feelings too. She says that's the most important part of being a nurse. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it expecting work, but saw an unknown number. David, this is Sarah. I am so incredibly sorry. There was a car accident and I couldn't leave my patient. Emma knows to wait with you. If this is too much, I understand completely. I'll arrange for my neighbor to pick her up. Sarah. David looked at Emma, who was carefully arranging her napkin and seemed completely content to wait for her mother's return. The old David would have politely excused himself and ended this unconventional evening. But something about the little girl's matter-of-fact acceptance of her mother's priorities, her complete trust that things would work out, made him reconsider. He typed back, "No problem. Emma and I are getting along fine. Take your time." "Is that Mommy?" Emma asked, reading his expression. "Yes. She's still helping her patient, but she wanted to make sure you were okay." Emma smiled. "I told her you seemed nice. She was worried you might be scary, but you're not scary at all." David couldn't help but smile back. What made her think I might be scary? She said sometimes very successful people forget how to be regular people. But you ordered chocolate milk with me, so you must still remember. Out of the mouths of babes, David thought. His sister had said Sarah wouldn't be impressed by his wealth, but he was beginning to understand that she had meant something much deeper than he'd initially realized. "Tell me more about your mom," David said, surprising himself with his genuine curiosity. Emma's face glowed with obvious adoration. "She's the best mommy in the whole world. She sings when she cooks, even though she's not very good at singing. She lets me help with everything, even the important stuff, and she never ever breaks her promises." "What kind of promises does she make?" "Like she promised we'd go to the zoo next weekend, and she promised to read me an extra story tonight, because I was brave about coming here by myself. Well, not by myself. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought me, but she had to go home to her cats." David realized that Sarah had arranged backup plans and safety measures for every aspect of this evening, even accounting for the possibility that her date might not be comfortable with an unexpected child companion. The level of organization and forethought impressed him in a way that most business strategies failed to do. "Emma," David said, "what do you want to be when you grow up?" "A nurse like Mommy," she replied without hesitation. "I want to help people feel better too. Mommy says it's the best job in the world because you get to make people's bad days good again." David thought about his own profession, the deals he made, the companies he acquired, the wealth he accumulated. When was the last time his work had made someone's bad day good? When had he used his success to help rather than simply to gain more success? "That sounds like a wonderful goal," he said honestly. Emma beamed at his approval. "Mommy says I'm already good at taking care of people. I take care of her when she's sad about Daddy being gone, and I take care of Bubbles, and sometimes I help Mommy take care of our neighbor Mr. Peterson when his arthritis hurts." The picture Emma was painting of her life with Sarah was nothing like David's usual social circle. Instead of networking events and charity galas attended for tax benefits, he was hearing about a community where people genuinely cared for each other, where a 5-year-old could be trusted with real responsibilities, where helping others was simply a way of life. "Your mom is lucky to have you," David said. "I'm lucky to have her too," Emma replied, "even when she has to work late or deal with sick people. I know she always comes back." The trust in Emma's voice was absolute, and David found himself envying the certainty of that bond. When had he last had that kind of faith in another person? When had anyone had that kind of faith in him? As they sat in the comfortable quiet of the cafe, David realized that this unexpected evening was teaching him something that all his business success had never shown him, what it meant to be truly rich. The chocolate milk was long finished, but Emma showed no signs of restlessness as she continued to chat with David about everything from her goldfish's swimming habits to the proper way to make peanut butter sandwiches. David found himself genuinely engaged in these conversations, something that would have seemed impossible an hour ago. "Do you have any pets?" Emma asked, swinging her legs under the table. "No," David replied. "I travel too much for work. It wouldn't be fair to an animal." Emma considered this seriously. "Mommy says that's very responsible thinking. She says we can only take care of things if we can really take care of them properly. Your mother seems to have a lot of wise sayings." "She does," Emma agreed. "She says the best lessons come from thinking about other people's feelings, not just your own." David's phone had been buzzing periodically with work emails, but for the first time in years, he found himself ignoring them. There was something compelling about Emma's straightforward way of looking at the world that made his usual concerns seem distant and somehow less urgent. "Emma," David said, "what does your mom do at the hospital besides help sick people?" "Lots of things," Emma said, her face brightening. "She makes sure people take their medicine, and she talks to them when they're scared. Sometimes she holds their hands when they're having procedures. She says being sick is scary, so part of her job is helping people not be so afraid." "That sounds like important work." "It is. She comes home and tells me stories about the people she helped. Not their private stuff," Emma added quickly, "because that's not allowed. But she helped a little boy who was afraid of getting stitches by singing songs with him. And she helped an old lady who was lonely by bringing her pictures I drew." David was struck by the image of Sarah bringing her daughter's artwork to brighten a patient's day. In his world, charitable giving was usually handled by accountants and involved tax-deductible donations to causes chosen more for their networking potential than their impact. "Do you ever get sad when your mom has to work late like tonight?" David asked. Emma nodded. "Sometimes. But Mommy explained that when someone is really sick, they need help right away. She said it's like if I fell down and got hurt, I would want someone to help me right away, even if they had to change their plans." The logic was unassailable, presented with the clarity that only children seemed to possess. David thought about the times he'd refused to reschedule meetings for family events, the relationships he'd sacrificed for business opportunities. Had he ever put someone else's genuine need before his own agenda? "Your understanding about this is very mature," David said. "Mommy says understanding is different from liking," Emma replied. "I understand why she had to stay at the hospital tonight, but I still wished she could be here. That's okay, though. She says it's normal to have more than one feeling about something." David marveled at the emotional intelligence this 5-year-old possessed. In his experience, most adults struggled to acknowledge conflicting emotions, let alone articulate them so clearly. "What do you and your mom do for fun?" he asked. Emma's entire demeanor brightened. "Lots of things. We go to the park and feed the ducks. We have movie nights with popcorn. We bake cookies and make a big mess in the kitchen. Oh, and we dance in the living room to silly songs." "That sounds wonderful." "Last weekend we had a picnic on the living room floor because it was raining outside. Mommy said it was even better than a real picnic because we didn't have to worry about ants." Emma giggled at the memory. "We pretended the couch was a mountain and the coffee table was a lake." David tried to imagine his sterile, perfectly decorated penthouse being used for such activities. The thought was both appealing and terrifying. "Do you have a big apartment?" "Not really," Emma said matter-of-factly. "It's kind of small, but Mommy says it's not about how big your home is. It's about how much love is inside it. Our apartment has lots and lots of love." "I'm sure it does." "Do you have a big house?" Emma asked, with the directness that had already caught David off guard several times. Yes, I do. Is it full of love too? The question hung in the air like a challenge David wasn't prepared to meet. His penthouse was full of expensive art, cutting-edge technology, and designer furniture. But love? When had love ever been a consideration in his living space? I live alone, David said carefully, so it's pretty quiet. That sounds lonely, Emma said with sincere sympathy. Mommy says everyone needs people to love and people who love them back. Maybe that's why you're here meeting Mommy. Maybe you need more love in your house. The innocence with which Emma had identified what David's therapist had spent months trying to get him to acknowledge was both endearing and unsettling. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Maybe you're right, David admitted. Emma smiled triumphantly. I'm good at figuring out what people need. Mommy says I have a gift for seeing people's hearts. What do you see when you look at me? Emma studied his face with the serious concentration of a scientist examining a specimen. You seem sad, she said finally, but also kind. And you're trying really hard to make sure I have a good time even though you probably didn't expect to spend your evening with a little kid. David was amazed by her perceptiveness. You're very observant. Mommy taught me to pay attention to people's feelings. She says words are only part of how people talk. You have to watch their faces and their body language too. And what is my body language telling you? That you're a little nervous but trying not to show it. And that you're surprised you're having fun. David laughed, genuinely delighted by her assessment. You're absolutely right on both counts. I knew it, Emma said with satisfaction. Mommy's going to be so happy that you like talking to me. She was worried you might think I was annoying. Why would she think that? Because some people don't like kids very much. They think we're too loud or ask too many questions. Mommy always says I'm curious, but some people call it being a pest. David felt a surge of protective anger toward anyone who had ever made this bright, thoughtful child feel unwelcome. Anyone who thinks you're a pest is missing out on getting to know a very special person. Emma beamed. You really think I'm special? I do. You're smart, kind, and you see things that most adults miss. Those are very special qualities. Mommy says I get my kindness from her and my curiosity from my daddy. Tell me about your father, David said gently. Emma's expression grew more subdued. He lives in California now. He and Mommy decided they were better as friends than as married people. He calls me every week and sends me letters with pictures. Do you miss him? Yeah, but Mommy says missing someone means you love them, and that's a good thing. She says even though Daddy lives far away, he still loves me very much. David was impressed by how Sarah had apparently handled the divorce, helping Emma maintain a positive relationship with her father despite the distance. It spoke to a level of maturity and selflessness that David rarely encountered. Your mom sounds like she handles difficult situations very well. She does, Emma agreed. When I get scared or upset about something, she always knows how to make it better. She says problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved, and if you stay calm and think carefully, you can usually figure out the answer. That's excellent advice. She gives the best advice. Like when I was nervous about starting kindergarten, she told me that being nervous meant my brain was getting ready for something new and exciting. She said nervous feelings are just excitement wearing a disguise. David found himself wishing he'd had someone with Sarah's wisdom to guide him through his own fears and uncertainties over the years. Instead, he'd learned to push through emotions rather than understand them, to view feelings as obstacles rather than information. Emma, he said, what makes your mom happy? Me, Emma said without hesitation. She always says I'm the best thing that ever happened to her. And helping people at work makes her happy. And dancing in the kitchen. And ice cream sundaes on special occasions. Simple pleasures, David observed. Mommy says the best things in life are usually simple, like hugs and bedtime stories and seeing flowers grow. David's phone buzzed again. And this time he saw another message from Sarah. Still at the hospital, but should be done within the hour. I hope Emma isn't talking your ear off. She tends to chatter when she's nervous or excited. David typed back. She's delightful. No rush. We're having a great conversation. Was that Mommy again? Emma asked. Yes, she'll be here soon. Good. I can't wait for you to meet her. She's even more special than me, and I'm pretty special. David laughed at her matter-of-fact confidence. I'm looking forward to meeting her too. I think you're going to really like each other. Emma said with the certainty of someone who had apparently appointed herself matchmaker. You both care about doing good work, and you both asked me lots of questions because you wanted to understand me better. People who are curious about other people usually like each other. David was continuously amazed by Emma's insights into human nature. This 5-year-old had a better understanding of relationship dynamics than most of the adults in his professional circle. Have you given this much thought? He asked, amused. I want Mommy to be happy, Emma said seriously. She takes care of everyone else all the time. She deserves someone who will take care of her too. The protective love in Emma's voice was unmistakable, and David felt honored to be considered a potential candidate for such an important role in their small family's life. As they sat together in the warm glow of the cafe, David realized that his evening hadn't gone as planned, but it had given him something far more valuable than a typical dinner conversation. Through Emma's eyes, he was beginning to see what really mattered in life, and for the first time in years, he found himself excited about the possibility of letting someone else matter to him. David and Emma had moved on to sharing a piece of chocolate cake when the cafe door chimed and a woman hurried through, scanning the room with worried eyes. Even before Emma exclaimed, "Mommy!" David knew this had to be Sarah Mitchell. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, artificial way of the women David usually dated. Sarah's beauty was natural and unguarded. Shoulder-length brown hair, slightly mussed from a long day, minimal makeup that couldn't hide the exhaustion in her green eyes, and scrubs that marked her as someone who prioritized function over fashion. She moved with the efficient grace of someone accustomed to urgent situations. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah said, reaching their table with obvious relief. "I'm so sorry, baby. The accident victim needed emergency surgery, and I couldn't leave until—" She stopped mid-sentence, suddenly aware that she was explaining herself to a stranger while her daughter watched. David stood, extending his hand. "You must be Sarah. I'm David Sterling, and please don't apologize. Emma has been excellent company." Sarah shook his hand, her grip firm despite her obvious nervousness. "Mr. Sterling, I am mortified. This is not how I planned for our evening to begin. I arranged for my neighbor to watch Emma, but when the emergency came up—" "Mommy," Emma interrupted. "David bought me chocolate milk and we shared cake and we talked about everything. He's really nice, just like you hoped." Sarah's cheeks flushed pink. "Emma, you weren't supposed to tell him about—" She stopped, looking mortified. "I'm sorry, again. This is not going well at all." David found her flustered honesty refreshing after years of carefully choreographed social interactions. "Please, sit down. Emma was just telling me about your work. What you do sounds incredibly important." Sarah slid into the booth beside Emma, automatically smoothing her daughter's hair and checking her for any signs of distress. The gesture was so natural and loving that David felt something twist in his chest. "It was a multi-car accident," Sarah explained, her professional composure returning. 3 victims, and one of them was a child about Emma's age. I couldn't leave knowing that another mother was sitting in the waiting room, terrified for her baby. "Of course you couldn't," David said, meaning it completely. "Emma explained about your priorities. I'm impressed by your dedication." Sarah looked surprised. "You're not angry. Most people would be furious about being stood up for 2 hours. "I wasn't stood up," David replied. "I was given the chance to meet an extraordinary young lady who taught me more about life in one evening than I've learned in months." Emma beamed at the compliment, while Sarah's expression softened with a mixture of relief and something that might have been the beginning of affection. "She is pretty extraordinary," Sarah agreed, squeezing Emma's hand. "Though I'm biased." "Mommy, David has a really big house, but it doesn't have much love in it," Emma announced with her characteristic directness. "I told him he needs more people to care about." "Emma," Sarah looked mortified again. "You can't just—" "It's fine," David interrupted, amused. "She's not wrong. Emma has a gift for cutting straight to the truth." Sarah studied his face, perhaps looking for signs of offense or condescension. "She does have strong opinions about people's emotional well-being. I've been trying to teach her about appropriate boundaries." "Please don't," David said. "Her honesty is refreshing. In my business, I'm surrounded by people who tell me what they think I want to hear. Emma tells me what she thinks I need to hear. There's a big difference." "What business are you in?" Sarah asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I researched your company online. but I wanted to hear it from you. You researched me? David was touched by the effort she'd made. I wanted to be prepared for conversation. I don't exactly move in high-powered business circles. Sarah's honesty was endearing. Sterling dynamics is impressive. You've built something remarkable. Thank you. But I'm more interested in hearing about your work. Emma told me you don't just treat patients medically. You help them emotionally too. Sarah's face lit up, and David caught a glimpse of the passion that drove her. That's the most important part, really. Physical healing happens faster when people feel cared for, when they're not afraid. Medical knowledge is just part of being a good nurse. Mommy helped a scared little boy today, Emma added. She sang songs with him during his stitches. Emma, patient's information is private, Sarah reminded gently. I didn't say his name or anything personal, Emma protested. I just said you were good at helping scared kids not be scared anymore. David watched the interaction with fascination. Sarah corrected Emma firmly but kindly, teaching boundaries while still acknowledging her daughter's good intentions. It was masterful parenting. How do you balance such emotionally demanding work with being a single mother? David asked. Sarah's expression grew more serious. It's not easy. There are days when I feel like I'm failing at both. But Emma understands that helping people is important, and she's incredibly resilient. Mommy never fails, Emma said loyally. She just gets tired sometimes. Even when I'm tired, Sarah said, kissing the top of Emma's head. I'm never too tired for you. David observed the easy affection between mother and daughter with something approaching envy. When had he last felt that kind of unconditional love? When had he last offered it? Emma mentioned that her father lives in California, David said carefully. Sarah nodded, her expression neutral. We divorced 2 years ago. It was amicable. We just wanted different things from life. He's a good father, just not a present one by choice. Emma and I have built a pretty good life together. A really good life, Emma corrected. The best life. Sarah smiled. Emma's very loyal. She makes everything better just by being herself. I can see why, David said. She's remarkable. You've done an incredible job raising her. Thank you, Sarah said softly. That means a lot, especially coming from someone someone successful like you. Success is relative, David found himself saying. I've built a profitable company, but you've built a human being who makes the world better just by existing. I'd say your accomplishment is far more impressive. Sarah stared at him for a moment, clearly not expecting such sentiment from a man of his reputation. That's a beautiful way to look at it. It's also true, David said. Emma spent the evening telling me about kindness, empathy, and what really matters in life. Those aren't qualities that develop by accident. Mommy says my heart came pre-programmed with extra love, Emma announced. But she taught me how to use it properly. Pre-programmed? David asked, charmed. Like a computer, Emma explained seriously. Mommy says some people have to learn how to love and be kind, but I was born knowing how. She just taught me when and how to show it so I don't overwhelm people. David looked at Sarah with new respect. You're raising a philosopher. I'm raising a little girl who I hope will make the world a kinder place, Sarah replied. Everything else is just details. Speaking of details, David said, have you eaten? I imagine you've been too busy to have dinner. Sarah looked embarrassed again. I grabbed a sandwich from the hospital vending machine around noon, but we should probably get going. Emma has school tomorrow, and you've already given up your entire evening. I don't want to go yet, Emma protested. David was going to tell me about his job, and I want to hear Mommy's story about the singing boy at the hospital. David found himself reluctant to end the evening as well. Would you consider having dinner? Nothing fancy, just something to eat while we talk. I'd like to hear more about both of your lives. Sarah hesitated, glancing at Emma, who was looking hopeful. Are you sure? You didn't sign up for dinner with a 5-year-old. I'm discovering that dinner with a 5-year-old is exactly what I needed, David replied. Besides, Emma promised to tell me about proper peanut butter sandwich construction. I can't miss that. It's very technical, Emma said seriously. There are specific ratios involved. Sarah laughed, and the sound transformed her face completely. David realized that despite her exhaustion and the stress of her day, she was genuinely enjoying herself. All right, she agreed, but somewhere child-friendly. And I insist on paying for Emma's meal. Absolutely not, David said firmly. This is still a date, even if it's unconventional. Besides, I invited you both. It's not really a date anymore, Sarah protested. It's become something else entirely. David considered this. She was right. What they were sharing bore no resemblance to any date he'd ever been on. It was more intimate, more real, more meaningful than any carefully orchestrated romantic evening. You're right, he agreed. It's better than a date. It's a glimpse into what life could be like with people who actually matter. Sarah's breath caught slightly at his words, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other while Emma continued to demolish her cake. Are you two going to stare at each other all night? Emma asked, looking up with chocolate on her chin. Because I'm ready for actual dinner, and David still hasn't heard Mommy's funny story about the patient who thought she was a celebrity nurse. The spell broke, and both adults laughed. You're right, Sarah said, wiping Emma's face with her napkin. Let's find some real food and proper conversation. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the cafe, David realized that this evening had already changed something fundamental in his understanding of what he wanted from life. The question now was whether he was brave enough to pursue it. They ended up at Luigi's, a family-owned Italian restaurant 3 blocks away that Sarah recommended. It's nothing fancy, she warned as they walked, but the food is good and they love children. David was struck by how different this experience was from his usual high-end dining. Instead of a maitre d' and white tablecloths, they were greeted by Luigi himself, a jovial man in his 60s who immediately recognized Sarah and Emma. Sarah! And little Emma! Luigi beamed, enveloping them both in warm hugs. You haven't been here in too long. And who is this handsome gentleman? Luigi, this is David, Sarah said, her cheeks pink with what David hoped was pleasure rather than embarrassment. David, Luigi has been feeding us since Emma was 2 years old. Any friend of Sarah and Emma is family here, Luigi declared, pumping David's hand enthusiastically. You have excellent taste in companions, my friend. These two are special people. I'm discovering that, David replied, surprised by how much he meant it. Luigi seated them at a corner booth and immediately brought over crayons and a coloring book for Emma, along with a bread basket that was clearly homemade. Emma, I have new pictures of my grandchildren to show you later, he said conspiratorially. I want to see, Emma exclaimed. Did little Marco lose his tooth yet? 2 teeth, Luigi announced proudly before bustling away to get their menus. David watched this interaction with fascination. In his world, restaurant staff were professionally courteous but distant. Here, Emma was clearly considered part of the family. Luigi and his wife Rosa lost their daughter in a car accident 5 years ago, Sarah explained quietly. Emma was about the same age as their granddaughter who lives in Italy. They've sort of adopted us as local family. That's beautiful, David said, meaning it. How did you find this place? Desperation, honestly, Sarah laughed. Emma was going through a phase where she would only eat spaghetti, and I was too exhausted to cook after double shifts. Luigi took one look at us. Me practically falling asleep at the table and Emma having a meltdown because her spaghetti wasn't right, and he just took over. Brought Emma back to the kitchen, let her help make her own pasta, and sent me home with enough food for a week. Just like that. Just like that. When I tried to pay extra for his kindness, he said family doesn't charge family. We've been coming here ever since. David marveled at the network of care Sarah had built around herself and Emma. It wasn't based on money or status, but on genuine human connection and mutual support. Tell David about the time you helped Rosa when she hurt her back, Emma suggested, looking up from her coloring. Emma, David doesn't need to hear every story, Sarah protested. I'd like to hear it, David said honestly. Sarah looked embarrassed, but continued. Rosa hurt her back lifting supplies, and Luigi was panicking because they couldn't afford to close the restaurant while she recovered. So I started coming in on my days off to help. Just basic nursing care, making sure she was following her physical therapy routine, helping with pain management. Mommy came every day for 2 weeks, Emma added proudly. And she brought me, so I got to learn how to fold napkins and count silverware. It was nothing special, Sarah said quickly. Anyone would have helped. David doubted that was true. In his experience, most people were too busy with their own lives to notice when others needed help, let alone to consistently provide it. What did you get in return? He asked. Sarah looked puzzled. Get in return? I didn't expect anything in return. Rosa and Luigi are good people who needed help. Mommy doesn't help people to get things back, Emma explained. as if this were obvious. She helps people because helping people is good. David felt something shift in his worldview. His entire professional life was built on exchanges, services for payment, favors for future consideration, relationships for networking opportunities. The concept of helping without expectation of return was foreign to him. Luigi returned with their menus, but Emma immediately announced, "I want spaghetti with butter and cheese, Luigi. And can I help make it?" "Of course, little chef," Luigi beamed. "What about you lovely adults?" Sarah ordered the chicken parmesan, and David found himself asking for Luigi's recommendation rather than studying the menu analytically, as he usually did. "For you, my friend, the osso buco. It's my Rosa's recipe, and it will change your life," Luigi declared before disappearing again. "He's not exaggerating," Sarah said. "Rosa's osso buco is incredible. But be warned. Luigi considers it a personal insult if you don't clean your plate." "I'll keep that in mind," David smiled. "How often do you come here?" "Maybe once a month. It's our special treat. Emma calls it our fancy dinner, even though it costs less than most people spend on lunch." David thought about his usual restaurants where a single meal often cost more than some people made in a day. The wine list alone at his regular spots probably exceeded Sarah's monthly grocery budget. "What constitutes a special occasion worthy of Luigi's?" he asked. "Good report cards? Successful potty training milestones when she was younger? My birthday? The anniversary of the day we moved to this neighborhood," Sarah listed. "Or sometimes just when we've had a particularly good week. You celebrate small victories." "The small victories are usually the most important ones," Sarah replied. "Emma learning to tie her shoes was a bigger celebration than my promotion to charge nurse because it meant more to her sense of independence and confidence." David tried to remember the last time he'd celebrated something that wasn't related to business success or financial gain. He came up empty. Luigi returned to escort Emma to the kitchen for her cooking lesson, leaving David and Sarah alone for the first time all evening. "I have to admit," Sarah said, "this is not how I imagined our evening going." "Are you disappointed?" David asked, suddenly concerned. "No," Sarah replied quickly. "Surprised, but not disappointed. You've been incredibly gracious about Emma crashing our date. Most men would have been out the door the minute a child showed up." "Most men are idiots," David said, earning a smile. "Emma is delightful, but I have to ask, was bringing her intentional? A way to test my character?" Sarah looked horrified. "No, God, no. I would never use Emma as a dating strategy. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was supposed to watch her, but when the hospital called about the emergency, Emma was already dressed up because she was excited about Mommy having a special dinner. Mrs. Rodriguez said Emma could come wait with you for a few minutes while she went home to check on her cats, and I thought you'd be gone by the time I got here." "I almost was," David admitted. "If Emma hadn't explained about your work, I probably would have left. I wouldn't have blamed you. This whole situation was unfair to you." "Sarah," David said seriously, "this evening has been the most real, most meaningful time I've spent with another person in years. If that's unfair, I need more unfairness in my life." Sarah studied his face as if trying to determine whether he was being sincere. "Really? You're not just being polite?" "I don't do polite. Ask anyone who knows me. I do efficient, profitable, and strategic. I don't do polite for the sake of feelings." "Then what do you call what you've been doing with Emma all evening?" David considered this. "Honest. She asked me honest questions, so I gave her honest answers. She told me honest truths about life, so I listened honestly. It's the most straightforward conversation I've had in months." "She has that effect on people," Sarah said fondly. "Children in general, but Emma especially. She sees through pretense immediately. What does she see when she looks at you?" Sarah's expression grew tender. "Hopefully a mother who loves her more than anything in the world and is doing her best to give her a good life." "And what do you see when you look at me?" David asked, genuinely curious. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. Someone who's successful and intelligent, obviously, but also someone who's been lonely without realizing it. Emma noticed it right away. "She told me in the car that you seemed like you needed more hugs in your life." David felt something catch in his throat. "She said that?" "She has strong opinions about people's hug quotient. She thinks most adults are severely deficient." "She's probably right. When was the last time someone hugged you?" Sarah asked gently. David tried to remember. "My sister Emma, the one who set up this date. Probably 3 months ago when she visited. Before that, I honestly can't remember. Sarah's expression was so compassionate that David felt exposed in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly comforting. That explains a lot, she said softly. What does it explain? Why you seem surprised that people can just care about each other without expecting anything in return. Why Emma's unconditional friendliness caught you off guard. Why you look like you can't quite believe that this evening is real. David felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's trained to notice when people are hurting, Sarah replied. You're very good at presenting a successful, confident exterior, but underneath you seem hungry. Hungry for what? Connection, community, the kind of relationships where people know who you are when you're not performing success. Before David could respond, Emma came running back to the table, her face glowing with pride and a light dusting of flour. I made the most beautiful spaghetti, she announced. Luigi says I'm a natural chef. And Rosa gave me a cookie recipe to take home. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Sarah said, automatically brushing flour from Emma's hair. Did you remember to thank them? Of course. And I told Luigi that David needs more friends like you and him because he doesn't have enough people who care about him just because he's nice. David felt his face grow warm as Sarah shot him a sympathetic look. Emma, Sarah said gently, remember what we talked about regarding personal observations. That some things are true, but not necessarily things we say out loud, Emma recited. But David doesn't seem to mind when I say true things. Do you, David? I don't mind, David said honestly. Though you might want to warn me before you share your insights with Luigi and Rosa. Emma giggled. I already told them you were lonely but very nice, and that you needed to eat more home-cooked food because restaurant food doesn't have enough love in it. David looked at Sarah helplessly. Is there any topic she won't offer commentary on? I haven't found one yet, Sarah laughed. Last week she told our mailman that he needed to find a girlfriend because his aura was too blue. My aura? David asked, fascinated despite himself. Very gray with some yellow around the edges, Emma announced. But it's getting more colorful already since you met us. Emma learned about auras from a children's book about feelings, Sarah explained. She's decided she can see people's emotional colors. What color is your mother's aura? David asked Emma. Rainbow, Emma said without hesitation. But mostly pink and gold because she loves people so much. David looked at Sarah, seeing her through Emma's eyes, a woman whose life radiated love and care despite its challenges and sacrifices. As their dinner arrived and they settled into easy conversation punctuated by Emma's observations about everything from Luigi's cooking technique to the romantic potential of the couple at the next table, David realized that he was experiencing something he'd never had before, a glimpse of what family felt like. And for the first time in his adult life, he wanted something more than success. Their dinner at Luigi's had stretched into the evening, filled with laughter, stories, and Emma's running commentary on everything from the proper way to twirl spaghetti to her theories about why adults forget how to have fun. David found himself reluctant to see the evening end, but as Emma began to yawn between bites of her gelato, reality intruded. Someone's getting sleepy, Sarah observed, smoothing Emma's hair. We should probably head home soon. I'm not sleepy, Emma protested, then immediately yawned again, making David smile. Of course not, Sarah agreed diplomatically. But it's a school night, and Mrs. Patterson doesn't like it when her students fall asleep during story time. David felt a strange reluctance to return to his empty penthouse. Could I? Would it be appropriate for me to drive you home? I have a car service waiting. Sarah hesitated. That's very kind, but we usually take the bus. It's only a few stops. The bus? At this hour? With Emma tired? We take the bus everywhere, Emma said matter-of-factly. Mommy says buses are good for the environment and our budget. Plus, you meet interesting people on buses. David tried to imagine navigating public transportation with a sleepy 5-year-old and felt a surge of protectiveness. Please, let me drive you. It would make me feel better knowing you got home safely. Sarah looked touched by his concern. All right, thank you. That's very thoughtful. As they said goodbye to Luigi and Rosa, who insisted on sending them home with containers of leftover food, David called his driver. Within minutes, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the restaurant. Wow, Emma breathed. pressing her face to the window as they settled into the plush interior. "This is like a movie car." "Emma," Sarah said quietly, "remember your manners." "She's fine," David assured her. "I remember being impressed by fancy cars when I was her age." "Did you always have fancy cars?" Emma asked with her characteristic directness. "No," David replied. "When I was your age, my family didn't have much money. We rode the bus too." Emma studied his face with interest. "What changed?" "I worked very hard in school, got scholarships to college, and built my business from nothing," David explained. "But you know what? I think I was happier riding the bus with people I cared about than I've been in all these fancy cars by myself." Sarah gave him a look of such warmth that David felt his chest tighten. "Money can't buy happiness," Emma said wisely. "But it can buy ice cream, which is almost the same thing." Both adults laughed, and David marveled at how this child could find profound truths in the simplest observations. They were halfway to Sarah's apartment when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and immediately tensed. "It's the hospital," she said apologetically. "I have to take this," she answered with her professional voice. "Sarah Mitchell." David watched her expression change as she listened, her face growing pale. "How many victims?" "I see. Yes, I understand. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and looked at David with obvious distress. "There's been a massive accident, a bus collision. They're calling in all available nursing staff. I have to go back to the hospital." "Of course," David said immediately. "What about Emma?" Sarah's distress deepened. "Mrs. Rodriguez is visiting her sister tonight. My usual backup sitter is out of town. She looked at her daughter, who had fallen asleep against the window. "I might have to bring her to the hospital and hope one of the other nurses can watch her in the break room." David felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he'd never experienced before. "No," he said firmly. "I'll watch her." Sarah stared at him. "What? I'll watch Emma? You can't take a 5-year-old to a hospital during a mass casualty event, and you shouldn't have to worry about childcare when people need your help." "David, I can't ask you to do that. You barely know us, and Emma's never stayed with anyone outside our small circle of trusted people. You're not asking, I'm offering. And as for Emma not knowing me well," he looked at the sleeping child. "She spent the entire evening telling me she was a good judge of character, and that I needed more people to care about. Let me prove her right." Sarah looked torn between gratitude and uncertainty. "She's never spent the night away from me." "Then don't think of it as away from you. Think of it as giving her a chance to take care of someone who needs it. She told me multiple times tonight that taking care of people is important." "David." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "This is too much to ask of anyone, let alone someone I just met." "Sarah," David said gently, 3 hours ago, I was a lonely workaholic who hadn't had a genuine conversation in months. Emma spent the evening teaching me about kindness, community, and what really matters. Now you need help, and I have the opportunity to put those lessons into practice. Please don't take that away from me." Sarah searched his face, perhaps looking for signs of doubt or insincerity. "She has a very specific bedtime routine. She needs her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts. She sometimes has nightmares about her father moving away. She's never slept anywhere but her own bed or mine." "Tell me everything," David said seriously. "I'll take notes if necessary." For the next 10 minutes, as they drove to Sarah's apartment building, she gave him detailed instructions about Emma's routine, her favorite foods, her comfort objects, and emergency contacts. David listened intently, asking clarifying questions like he was preparing for the most important business presentation of his life. "Her favorite bedtime story is The Brave Little Mouse," Sarah said, as they pulled up to a modest apartment complex. "She knows it by heart, but she likes to hear it anyway, and if she has a nightmare, just hold her and tell her she's safe. Don't try to convince her the dream wasn't real. Just acknowledge that it was scary and that you're there to protect her." "The brave little mouse," David repeated. "Hold her if she's scared. Acknowledge her feelings. Got it." They went up to the 3rd-floor apartment, and David was struck by how different it was from his penthouse. The space was small but filled with warmth. Children's artwork on the refrigerator, photos of Emma and Sarah throughout the years, books stacked on every available surface. It was clearly a home where people lived and loved, not just a place to display wealth. Sarah quickly packed an overnight bag with Emma's essentials while David memorized the layout of the living space. Emma woke up during the transfer and looked confused to find herself in David's arms. "Where's Mommy?" she asked sleepily. "Mommy has to go help some people who were hurt," David explained gently. "She asked me to take care of you tonight. Is that okay?" Emma studied his face with her serious 5-year-old expression. "Are you scared about taking care of me?" "A little," David admitted honestly. "I've never taken care of a child before, but your mom taught me what to do, and you can help me if I make mistakes." Emma nodded approvingly. "I'm good at helping, and you seem like you'll be a good learner." Sarah knelt down to hug her daughter. "Be good for David, okay? I'll be back as soon as I can. Help lots of people feel better, Mommy," Emma said seriously. "David and I will be fine." Sarah looked at David over Emma's head, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay this kindness." "You don't repay kindness," David said, remembering Emma's words from earlier. "You just pass it forward." As Sarah left for the hospital, David found himself alone with Emma in her living room, holding a child's overnight bag and feeling the weight of responsibility unlike anything he'd ever experienced in the business world. "So," Emma said, settling onto the couch and patting the cushion beside her. "Want to hear about all the important things Mommy forgot to tell you?" David sat down beside her, realizing that his life had just taken another unexpected turn. "I'm all ears." Outside, Sarah was rushing back to the hospital to help with a crisis. Inside, David was about to discover that taking care of someone else's most precious person was both the most terrifying and most meaningful thing he'd ever done. And for the first time in his adult life, he understood what it meant to have something more important than himself to protect. David's penthouse had never felt so different than it did that night. Emma sat cross-legged on his Italian leather sofa, her small overnight bag beside her, looking around with the curious eyes of someone discovering a new world. "Your house is really big," she observed, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive artwork. "Do you ever get lost?" "Sometimes I feel lost here," David admitted, sitting beside her. "But not the way you mean." Emma nodded knowingly. "The feeling lost, not the walking lost. I understand. Sometimes I feel lost when Mommy works late shifts, even though I know exactly where I am." David was continuously amazed by her emotional intelligence. "What do you do when you feel that kind of lost?" "I remember that Mommy always comes back, and I think about all the people who love me. It makes the lost feeling smaller." Emma looked around the pristine space again. "Who do you think about when you feel lost?" The question hit David harder than he expected. He tried to think of people who genuinely cared about his well-being rather than his success or what he could do for them. The list was disturbingly short. "I'm still figuring that out," he said honestly. "Well, now you can think about me and Mommy," Emma announced matter-of-factly. "We care about you just because you're nice, not because you have a big house or fancy cars." David felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "Thank you, Emma. That means more than you know." "You're welcome. Now can I see your bedroom?" "Mommy says people's bedrooms tell you about their personalities." David led her through his minimalist bedroom with its king-sized bed, built-in closet, and attached bathroom. Emma studied everything with the intensity of a detective. "It's very clean," she said diplomatically, "but it doesn't look like anyone really lives here. Where are your pictures? Your favorite books? Your stuff?" David realized she was right. His bedroom looked like a hotel suite, expensive, functional, but completely impersonal. "I guess I don't have much stuff." "Everyone has stuff," Emma said confidently. "Things that make them happy or remind them of good times." "What makes you happy?" David tried to think. His work gave him satisfaction, but happiness. "I used to like building things when I was younger. Model airplanes, Lego sets. I was good with my hands." "Do you still have any of the things you built?" "No. I threw them away when I went to college. I thought they were childish." Emma looked genuinely sad for him. "That's too bad. Mommy kept my first finger painting, even though it's just purple blobs. She says it reminds her of how proud I was when I made it." They returned to the living room, and David found himself seeing his home through Emma's eyes. Beautiful but sterile. Expensive but empty of the personal touches that made a house a home. "Are you hungry?" David asked, realizing he should probably offer her something before bedtime. "A little. Mommy usually gives me a small snack before bed. Nothing too exciting, or I get wound up." David opened his refrigerator and stared at its contents. Leftover takeout, expensive wine, and very little that seemed appropriate for a 5-year-old's bedtime snack. "I have some strawberry yogurt," he offered uncertainly. Emma peered into the refrigerator and giggled. "You don't cook much, do you?" "I don't cook at all," David admitted. "I eat out or order in. Mommy says cooking is like giving yourself a hug from the inside. We should cook together sometime. I'm a very good helper." The casual assumption that there would be future sometimes warmed David more than it should have. "I'd like that." They settled on yogurt and some crackers David found in his pantry, sitting together at his dining table that he realized he'd never used for an actual meal with another person. "David," Emma said between bites, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why don't you have a family? You're nice and you have a good job and a big house. Seems like lots of people would want to be your family." David considered how to explain adult loneliness to a child. "I think I got so focused on working and being successful that I forgot to pay attention to the people part of life." "The people part is the best part," Emma said seriously. "Work is important, but people are what make you happy. You're very wise for someone who's 5. Mommy says I'm an old soul. That means I think about big things even though I'm little." Emma yawned, then tried to hide it. "I'm not tired yet." "Your mom said you'd probably say that," David smiled. "She also said your bedtime routine starts with a bath and includes a story about a brave mouse." Emma brightened. "You remember? Can I see your bathroom? I bet it's fancy like everything else." David's master bathroom was indeed impressive. Marble countertops, a rainfall shower, and a bathtub that could easily accommodate 2 adults. Emma's eyes widened as she took it in. "This bathtub is like a swimming pool," she exclaimed. "Can I take a bath in it?" "Of course. Your mom packed your bath toys and pajamas." David had never supervised a child's bath before, but Emma was remarkably self-sufficient, chattering away about her day while she played with her bath toys in his oversized tub. She told him about her best friend Lily's pet hamster, her teacher's new haircut, and her theory that goldfish were actually tiny underwater dragons. "David," she said as he helped her into her pajamas, "this has been one of the best days ever." "Really? Even though your mom had to work late?" "Especially because of that. I got to meet you, and Mommy got to help lots of hurt people, and now I get to have a sleepover in a fancy house. Plus, I think you needed us to visit you." "Why do you think that?" Emma considered this seriously. "Because your house was too quiet and clean. Houses need laughter and messy fingerprints and people who care about each other. We brought some of that tonight." David looked around his living room, which now contained Emma's overnight bag, her stuffed elephant Mr. Peanuts, and a child's jacket draped over his designer furniture. For the first time, his space felt lived in. "You're absolutely right," he said. "Now, are you ready for the story about the brave little mouse?" Emma curled up on the couch with Mr. Peanuts looking expectant. "Do you know the story? Your mom told me about it, but I don't know the details. Could you help me tell it?" Emma's face lit up with the joy of being helpful. "Okay. Once upon a time, there was a little mouse who lived in a big fancy house. As Emma guided him through the story of a mouse who learned that true courage came from caring about others rather than accumulating treasures, David realized she was essentially telling him his own story. The mouse in the tale had everything he thought he wanted but was lonely, until he learned to open his heart to friendship and love. And they all lived happily ever after," Emma concluded with a satisfied sigh. "Because the mouse figured out that having people who love you is better than having a house full of gold." "That's a very good story," David said softly. "It's Mommy's favorite. She says it reminds her of what's really important." Emma yawned again, this time not bothering to hide it. "David, will you stay with me until I fall asleep? I'm in a new place, and sometimes that makes my brain too excited to sleep." "Of course," David said, settling into the chair beside the couch. "Close your eyes and think about your mom helping people feel better." Emma snuggled deeper into the cushions, clutching Mr. Peanuts. "David?" "Yes? I think you're going to be a good part of our family." David's breath caught. "What makes you think that?" "Because you listened to all my stories tonight, and you're taking care of me even though you're scared, and you made Mommy smile in a way she doesn't usually smile." Emma's voice was getting drowsy. "Plus, your aura is getting more colorful every hour." "What color is it now?" "Pink and gold, like Mommy's. That means you're learning how to love people." As Emma's breathing deepened and she drifted off to sleep, David sat in his chair watching over her with a protectiveness he'd never felt before. His phone buzzed with work emails, but for the first time in his adult life, he ignored them completely. Somewhere across the city, Sarah was saving lives. Here in his penthouse, her daughter was teaching him what it meant to have a life worth saving. David spent the night in that chair, not wanting to risk waking Emma by moving, but also not wanting to miss a moment of being trusted with something so precious. As he watched her sleep, he understood that this little girl and her remarkable mother had given him something no amount of money could buy, a glimpse of what it felt like to have a family, and he knew he never wanted to lose it. David woke to the sound of soft footsteps and hushed voices. His neck was stiff from sleeping in the chair, but he'd kept his vigil through the night, waking periodically to check on Emma's peaceful sleep. Morning sunlight streamed through his floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden rays across his living room. "Daddy David?" Emma's voice was tentative, but there was something warm in the way she said it that made his heart skip. He opened his eyes to find Emma standing beside his chair, already dressed in the clothes Sarah had packed, her hair slightly mussed, but her eyes bright with morning energy. "Good morning, sweetheart," David said, stretching the cricks from his neck. "Did you sleep well?" "I did. I only woke up once, and when I saw you were still there watching over me, I felt safe again." Emma climbed onto the arm of his chair with practiced ease. "Mommy's here. She looks tired but happy." David looked up to see Sarah standing in his living room, still in her scrubs from the hospital. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, exhaustion evident in every line of her body, but her face glowed with the satisfaction of work well done. "I'm sorry to wake you," Sarah said softly. "The security desk let me up when I explained the situation. I hope that's okay." "Of course," David said, standing to greet her properly. "How did everything go at the hospital?" "Challenging, but we saved everyone," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the weight of a long night but also deep satisfaction. 15 people injured in that bus collision, but all stable now. Thank you for—" She gestured around the room, taking in the scene of her daughter safe and happy in his home. "I can't express how grateful I am." "Mommy, David took really good care of me," Emma announced, bouncing slightly on the chair arm. "He stayed in the chair all night to make sure I didn't have bad dreams, and he helped me with the brave mouse story, and he said we could cook together sometime." Sarah's eyes softened as she looked between her daughter and David. "He did all that, did he?" "I had an excellent teacher," David said, ruffling Emma's hair. "She explained everything very thoroughly." "I'm a good explainer," Emma agreed proudly. "And David's a good learner. His aura is definitely more colorful now." Sarah smiled, despite her exhaustion. "Well, we should get out of your way. I'm sure you have work." "Actually," David interrupted, "I was hoping you might stay for breakfast. I mean, if you're not too tired." Emma mentioned something about cooking being like giving yourself a hug from the inside, and I realized I'd like to learn how to do that. Emma clapped her hands together. "Pancakes! Mommy makes the best pancakes in the world." Sarah hesitated, glancing at her rumpled scrubs. "I'm not exactly dressed for—" "You're perfect," David said, and meant it completely. "You've spent the night saving lives. That's the most beautiful thing anyone could wear." Something shifted in Sarah's expression, a softening that went beyond mere gratitude. "All right, but I'm making the pancakes. Your kitchen looks like it's never been properly used." "That's because it hasn't," David admitted. "I can't even remember the last time I made anything more complicated than coffee." Emma slipped down from the chair and took David's hand. "Don't worry. Mommy and I will teach you everything. Cooking is really just following directions and adding love." As they moved into David's pristine kitchen, Sarah began opening cabinets with the efficiency of someone accustomed to working in unfamiliar spaces. "You actually have everything we need," she said, sounding surprised, "though I suspect none of it has been used." "The kitchen came fully equipped," David explained. "I just never saw the point of cooking for one person." "Cooking for people you care about is different," Emma said seriously. "It tastes better because you put love in it." Sarah pulled flour, eggs, and milk from David's refrigerator and pantry, moving with practiced ease despite her exhaustion. "Emma, can you show David how to measure flour while I start the batter?" For the next hour, David's sterile kitchen became something magical. Emma stood on a chair beside him, carefully guiding his hands as they measured ingredients. Sarah mixed batter while humming softly, the sound filling spaces that had been silent for years. Flour dusted the countertops, and there were small handprints on the refrigerator door where Emma had retrieved ingredients. The secret ingredient is the flip, Emma explained as Sarah demonstrated at the stove. You have to flip the pancake when it's ready, not when you think it should be ready. How do you know when it's ready? David asked, genuinely curious. The bubbles on top will pop and stay open, Sarah explained, and the edges will look set. It's about patience and paying attention. David found himself thinking that the lesson applied to more than just pancakes. As they sat around David's dining table eating breakfast, Emma chattered about her plans for the day while Sarah smiled drowsily over her coffee. David watched them with a contentment he'd never experienced before. David, Emma said suddenly, are you going to marry Mommy? Emma, Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. You can't just ask people things like that. Why not? I'm just wondering. You two look at each other the way people do in movies before they get married. David felt his face warm, but he didn't look away from Sarah's embarrassed expression. Your daughter has remarkable observational skills. She has no filter, Sarah said, still flustered. Emma, David and I just met yesterday. But sometimes you know things right away, Emma said with 5-year-old logic. Like how I knew David was nice before he even said anything, and how I knew Mr. Peanuts was the right stuffed animal the minute I saw him at the store. People are more complicated than stuffed animals, Sarah said gently. Are they, though? David found himself asking. Emma knew within minutes that I needed more love in my life. She knew you were someone special before we'd had a real conversation. Maybe we're the ones who complicate things that are actually simple. Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What are you saying? David took a breath, feeling like he was about to jump off a cliff. I'm saying that 24 hours ago, I thought success meant money and power and being able to control everything around me. But Emma taught me that success actually means having people who matter to you and being someone who matters to them. And? Sarah prompted softly. And I'd like to find out if I could matter to you both, if we could build something together that's more valuable than anything I've ever acquired. Emma looked between them with satisfaction. I told you your auras were getting more colorful. Sarah laughed, tears glittering in her eyes. David, are you asking me to date you based on aura compatibility and pancake chemistry? I'm asking you to give me a chance to learn how to be part of a family, David said honestly. Emma's taught me more about life in one evening than I've learned in 35 years. You've shown me what real strength and love look like. I want to be worthy of being part of what you've built together. What about your business? Your lifestyle? We're not exactly high society material. My business will run itself for a while. As for lifestyle, David looked around at his kitchen, still dusted with flour and warm with the lingering sense of breakfast. I think I prefer this one. Emma clapped her hands. So we're going to be a family? If your mom says yes, David replied, looking at Sarah hopefully. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Emma, go wash your hands and brush your teeth. Use the bathroom down the hall. When Emma had skipped away, Sarah turned to David with a serious expression. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because Emma gets attached quickly, and I won't have her heart broken because you decided this was all too real or too complicated. Sarah, David said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Yesterday I was successful and miserable. Today I'm successful and happy. The only thing that changed was meeting you and Emma. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Sarah squeezed his hand. This is crazy. We barely know each other. Then let's get to know each other. All of us, together. Sarah smiled, and David saw his future in that expression. Okay, but we take this slow. Emma needs stability, and I need to know you're serious about being part of our lives, not just playing house with a ready-made family. I'm serious, David promised. More serious than I've ever been about anything. Emma bounced back into the room, having clearly been eavesdropping. So, are we a family now? We're going to try, Sarah said, pulling her daughter onto her lap. David wants to learn how to be part of our family. I'm an excellent teacher, Emma announced. First lesson, families hug each other good morning and good night. She wiggled down from Sarah's lap and held her arms out to David expectantly. He knelt down and gathered her into a hug, feeling something settle into place in his chest that he hadn't realized was missing. Welcome to our family, David, Emma whispered against his shoulder. I knew you belonged with us." As David held this remarkable child and looked at her equally remarkable mother, he realized Emma had been right about something else. Sometimes you did know things right away. He'd known within hours that these two people were going to change his life. He just hadn't known they were going to save it. 6 months later, David's penthouse had been transformed. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Family photos filled the previously empty surfaces, and there were small fingerprints on the windows where Emma liked to watch the city below. The sterile showplace had become a home. Sarah had moved in gradually, first spending weekends, then longer stays, until it felt natural for all three of them to wake up together each morning. David had learned to cook Emma's favorite meals, and Emma had taught him the importance of bedtime stories and good-night hugs. More importantly, David had learned what it meant to put family first. He'd restructured his business to allow for more personal time, hired additional management to handle day-to-day operations, and discovered that success felt much sweeter when shared with people who loved him for who he was rather than what he'd accomplished. "Daddy David," Emma said one evening as they sat together reading before bed, "remember when you said your house didn't have enough love in it?" "I remember," David replied, smoothing her hair. "Well, now it has too much love. It's overflowing everywhere." David looked around their living room, where Sarah was grading Emma's homework while humming the same tune she'd hummed in Luigi's kitchen, where Emma's stuffed animals shared space with his business journals, where family game night had replaced solitary work sessions. "You're right," he said, pulling both his girls closer. "It's definitely overflowing." "That's the best kind of house," Emma declared with satisfaction. "The kind where love spills out onto everyone who visits." David kissed the top of her head, marveling at how a 5-year-old's unexpected appearance at a blind date had led him to discover that the richest man wasn't the one with the most money, but the one with the most love. And by that measure, he was the wealthiest man alive.